Hello everyone, welcome to AWS Tutorials. In AWS Tutorials, we provide workshops and exercises to learn about AWS services. These workshops and exercises are published to our website aws-dojo.com. Today, we are going to talk about job bookmark feature in AWS Glue jobs, which can be used to avoid any kind of reprocessing of data when running jobs multiple times. So let's understand how job bookmarks works. In order to understand job bookmark, let's go through one example. So suppose you are creating a Glue job which runs multiple times based on the schedule. It looks into a file coming to some S3 source bucket folder, and then it simply processes those files into some destination file, in some destination bucket, and in some folder. So suppose that this Glue job based on schedule or event or on demand you run. And when you run this job, actually there are file 1 and 2 available in your source bucket. The job run, and then job created some destination files X and Y. So this is when we run the Glue job for the first time. Now what happens is that over a period of time, before few more files get added to your source bucket. So suppose you got file 3 and file 4 added to your source bucket. And now if you're running your Glue job again, then since your file 1 and 2 are already processed, only file 3 and 4 are the new files. So second job should not process file 1 and second job run should not process file 1 and 2, should only process file 3 and 4. Okay, and building on top of that, suppose again before the next Glue job run, suppose file 2 and file 3 both got updated or changed, a new file 5 got added, and if my Glue job runs again, then my file 1 and file 4 should not be processed. Only file 2 and 3 should be processed because they are changed, and also file 5 should be processed because that is a new file. So you understand here that we are running this Glue job multiple times, and your objective is that the files which are already processed, which has not changed since the previous Glue job run, should not be processed again. So you want to avoid reprocessing of your data, and if you have a requirement like that, that can be achieved by using job bookmark. So you can enable job bookmark on Glue, and what job bookmark does is that it every time it runs, it persists the state information of your run, and using that state information, it makes sure that when the next time the job runs again, it will avoid to process the data which are already processed in the previous runs. So that's exactly what the job of the task of the job bookmark is. So having understand what exactly job bookmark is, let's talk about what state information job bookmarks maintain. And that's something you have to not bother much. I think it's a good to know. What is more important to understand that how you can configure job bookmark, and how you can and based on what job should decide whether the data is duplicate or not. But just for the completeness point of view, let's understand what state information job bookmark persists or maintains. So one is source information, from which source the job is processing the data, what transformation what data transformation is performed as a part of the job bookmark, what target the data was written to, and the information from the run ID or run number, your attempts to finish the job, your version number, and those kind of things. So these are the set of information which job bookmark maintains as a state in order to ensure that during the multiple runs of the job, the data is not reprocessed or processed again. So let's understand one of the very fundamental thing of job bookmark, which is bookmark key. So what exactly is the bookmark key? Now, bookmark key is the column or the key in your source data, which is used to determine the what data is processed and what data is not processed. So think of a scenario like, suppose you are processing some employee information and you say, you know what, my employee ID is my job bookmark key. And in that case, if I'm running the job again, and if I see that, okay, some employee ID I have already processed, and now and the next time when my data comes, or next time when my job runs, I will run those records, those files where the employee ID has not already been processed in the earlier job runs. So basically, bookmark key is your column in your source data, which job will look for to ensure whether this record has already been processed or not processed. And there are various ways you can configure a bookmark key. It's a little different from a JDBC based sources versus an S3 based sources. So let's talk about one. So in JDBC sources, if you simply say that I'm enabling the job bookmark and you don't provide any job bookmark key, in that case, it is going to by default use primary key as a job bookmark key. And if you're using primary key as a job bookmark key, suppose your job run once and it processed primary key 1, 2, 3. When the job runs again, it will not process 1, 2, 3 anymore. It will process any other primary key. Yeah, so it's as simple as that. One condition which is very strict here, and you should know when you're using a primary key or by default configuration for bookmark key in JDBC, is that your primary key should be sequentially increasing or decreasing with no gaps. This is very important, very mandatory. Okay, and if you don't have any primary key like this, which is sequentially increasing or decreasing without any gaps, then you do have a choice to provide other combination of columns as your bookmark key. So for instance, in this case, you can see based on the department and job title and employee ID, I determine whether this record has already been processed or not processed. Even some timestamp field, if you want to use any timestamp field for that purpose, well, timestamp will not work. It has to be increasing or decreasing. So in this case, you can see here that if you're not using a primary key, you can use other columns or combination of columns, but in that case, again, the value in the column should be either increasing or decreasing, and in this case, gaps are allowed. Okay, so again, when you're defining a job bookmark key for JDBC sources, go for primary key if no gaps and the values are increasing, decreasing. Go for any other combination of column if values are increasing or decreasing, but gaps are there. Okay. In case of S3, it goes a little different. So by default, in case of S3, by default, it is based on the timestamp or last modified time of the object. So if I have run job once and I'm running job again, since last job run, if the object last date modified has changed, then it will reprocess. So based on the timestamp or based on the objects being modified or new objects created since last job run can be used in case of S3 based data. Okay, so by default S3 uses time-based last modified time-based way to identify whether the object has been already processed or not. But in case of S3 also, you can provide a combination of columns. So suppose you don't want to process based on the timestamp, you want to process based on some other set of columns, then in that case, you can provide those other set of columns as a bookmark key. And then when the job runs, it will make sure that if certain bookmark keys or values are already processed, they are not processed anymore. Again, the condition is same here. These columns should be increasing or decreasing, but no gaps are allowed. So this is the important of the bookmark key. Now, how do I configure job bookmark? So by default, you can simply say, you can go to your, when you're creating a job, go to the advanced section, say I want to enable the job bookmark. You can enable the job bookmark. Basically, you can do three things. You can enable the job bookmark. So it will start like bookmarking your job based on the bookmark key, whether it's a default or any custom column you have provided. If you disable it, then it will simply disable the job bookmarking, and in that case, when this job runs, it will do the full processing. It will simply not worry about any job bookmark state information at all. Okay, so you can always enable and disable. So when you enable a job bookmark, it will take care of the previous runs. If you disable a job bookmark, it will not take care of the previous runs. It will simply do full processing. You can also pause. And in that case, you can do incremental data processing since last run. And in this case, actually, you have two choices where you can say, let's reprocess from the job bookmark run ID or to job bookmark run ID. So based on the run ID, you can determine whether you want to do incremental processing from that run ID or up to that run ID. So that third pause combination is something which can do an incremental data processing for you, and based on the run ID, you can pass parameter based on the run ID to determine whether you want to process till some run ID or from some run ID. So primary three configuration you can do for a job bookmark: enable, disable, and pause. So moving on. How do I configure job bookmark key? So by default, like for instance, when you enable a job bookmark in case of JDBC, it will consider the job bookmark based on the primary key. In case of S3, it will consider job bookmark based on the last modified time of the object. But if you are trying to configure a custom job bookmark key, how do you do that in case of both JDBC and S3? And that's something you do inside code in your job. So what happens in the code, actually you can write the whole business logic, but three statements which are very important. The first statement is called your job init. So when you call the job init in your job bookmark, in your job code, this is the point when actually the job will fetch the job bookmark state information. So in your code, when you're writing your job code, you need to call job init in order to fetch the job bookmark state information from the previous run. Then when you are reading the source data, like in this case, I'm reading the source data from a catalog. The database is HR, the table is employee. And in this case here I provide this job bookmark key. I'm saying that look for employee number. So in this table there should be a column called employee number. I am going to use this employee number as a job bookmark key, and this employee number is in the ascending order. Okay, so you know that your job bookmark key should be either ascending data or descending data, and and it can have gaps. So here is the second statement where we are mentioning the job bookmark key. In this case, I'm using I'm reading data from one of the catalog which has been from the catalog, which is probably sourcing data from S3 bucket. And then finally, you read data like this. You read data like this using a job bookmark key. So you fetch your state information, you read data like this, and then you do rest of the business logic which you want to do in order to transform this data. And finally, at the end of the job, you also say job.commit. And when you say job.commit, actually what happens, it saves the job bookmark state information. So that's a place where job says, okay, I'm going to save my current run job bookmark information so that next job run can make use of this state information to avoid any reprocessing of the data. So these are the three statements you have to especially work on if you want to use a custom job bookmark key in your Glue job code. Okay, now moving on. So there are two more things you can do with a job bookmark, and that is rewind and reset, and they are very interesting ones. So for instance, in case of rewind, you can rewind your job bookmark to any previous job run. So suppose you run your job 10 times and you say, you know what, I want to rewind it to the 4th run. Okay, that means whatever data processed till the 4th run, I'm not going to reprocess that data, but 5th run onwards, any data which has already been processed, I'm going to process. So you can rewind your job bookmark to one of the previous run state, and that way, how much you rewind, that part of the data will be reprocessed again in the next Glue job run. Sometime you might want to do that. And you can also do reset. And you do reset when you say, you know what, I'm going to reprocess my data anyway. So I'm resetting everything. I don't care about any previous job bookmark. I'm going to reprocess. I'm going to reprocess all my data again. And in that case, you can reset your job bookmark. Now, one thing you should be very, very careful about. When you are rewinding or resetting, you are only telling job that, hey, either reprocess all the data or reprocess from one of the previous job run onwards. You're not cleaning your target data here. Okay? Glue is not cleaning your target data here. So if you're going for resetting or rewind, keep that in mind that if you don't clean your target data, there is a high probability based on your business logic that you will create duplicate data at your target. Or you will probably, I don't know, update your data somewhere in your target which is not desirable. So keep this thing in mind. You do have a choice to rewind or reset your job bookmarks, but in that case your target data is not rewinded or resetted back. Your target data has to be cleansed by you to ensure that when my reprocessing happens for my data, my target data does not create any kind of duplicate or corrupt data which you don't desire as an outcome. Okay, fair enough. Now, let's spend some time on S3 timestamp based bookmark. You know that in S3 based source, if you enable a job bookmark, actually it doesn't, it uses object's last modified date as a way to determine which object has been modified, which is not modified. So let's try to understand this thing a little more in detail, because it has some very interesting aspect and one very interesting configurations. So let's take example that at some point of T0, you configured your glue job, and then your S3 has got 4 files. And again, I'm taking this example from one of the glue documentation. You might want to go and read it to understand it more. But let me recreate that example here, because it's a very interesting one actually. So at the time of T0, you created some glue job, and then in your S3 bucket, you have got F1, F2, F3, F4, 4 files created into S3 bucket. And at the time of T1, suppose your glue job schedule came into the picture, and glue job started running. So your glue job started running at T1, and then obviously since it is running for the first time, it is going to process F1, F2, F3, F4, all the objects, because it is running for the first time. Okay, and then when this job runs, it will say, okay, fine, I processed from time zero from the time boundary T0 to T1. So it's going to put an state information saying that from T0 to T1, I processed 4 files, F1, F2, F3, and F4. Fair enough. Now suppose that while it was processing the file, or it processed the file, in the meantime, your F2, F3, F4 got modified. Okay, a new file comes. Okay, and next schedule is sometime at T2, and some new files also got added: F5, F6, F7, and F8. So your F2, F3, F4 got modified, and some new files F5, F6, F7, F8 came. And at that point of time, at some point of T2, your glue job runs again. Now, if you look at the state information here, it was that it has processed data from T0 to T1 time boundary. So it has to take a data which is T1 time boundary onwards. But what happens that this F2, F2, 3, and 4 got modified here as well. So in this case, ideally it will pick F5, F6, F7, and F8. But that is not correct. Ideally, it should be picking F2, 3, and 4 as well. So in order to solve this thing, and by the way, it doesn't work this way, it will put F2, 3, 4 as well, but you have to do a special configuration. And the way S3 works, it uses a term called max band. So max band is a property. When you're trying to read data from S3, you can set up max band as a property. And this max band has a default value of 15 minutes. And basically, based on the maxed band, based on the duration of the maxed band, when at the time of T2, the job is running, it will use max band to determine that how much time before T1 it has to go to see if the file has been modified. And in this case, it says, oh wow, so my max band goes till this point, and till this point my F2, 3, and 4 were modified. So I'm going to pick F2, 3, 4 modified plus F5, 6, 7, 8, which are the new files. Yeah. So again, how much time you choose for max band, so it depends on how long your job generally takes to finish, so that you cover, you adjust based on that. But keep this in mind that you should use the concept as max band when you're trying to use a default time-based bookmark in your S3 bucket to determine that in the subsequent runs, before the previous run, if some file has been modified and you want to pick those files for the reprocessing, then you should use max band as a configuration to fetch those files. Now guys, this one is, if you look for Glue job bookmark documentation, this concept has been very well explained there as well. I will highly encourage that you read that documentation to make sure that you understand this part, especially if you're trying to use S3 timestamp based bookmarking to determine what files has been modified. Okay, so having said that, what we are going to build today is that we will have a S3 bucket where my source file lies. We will crawl that S3 bucket to catalog the data, and from that catalog we will use a glue job to read data through that catalog. We will use a custom job bookmark key. In this case, we will not rely on the timestamp, but we'll use a custom job bookmark key, and based on that we will simply process the data and write to the S3 bucket, which in this case we are doing very simple transformation. I think we are simply converting CSV to JSON or something like that, but the idea is to understand how job bookmark key works. So in order to do this exercise, we have created a workshop. In fact, to do this lab, we have created one exercise, and this exercise has been published to our website, aws-dojo.com. I have provided the URL of the exercise in the description box below as well. Let me walk you through the steps of the exercise, and then you can do it yourself to get an experience of using the job bookmark with the Glue jobs. So let's jump to the exercise. So here is the exercise published to our website, aws-dojo.com. These are the steps you need to perform the exercise. The first step is that you need to have an AWS account in order to complete this exercise. And if you don't have an AWS account, you might want to use this link to create the AWS account. Then you create an IAM role, and this IAM role is used by the Glue job. So you go to the IAM management console, say I want to create a role for the Glue, and to keep it very simple, you simply provide a power user access, and then we give this role a nice name called Dojo Glue role. After that, we create an S3 bucket. So there are two files we are keeping into the S3 bucket, and this is the source configurations. We are saying in the Dojo, we create a bucket called Dojo Lake. In that, we have created a customers folder where we keep our source files. Then we have got our output folder where we keep our process destination files, and then we have a script folder which is used to keep the script of the Glue job, and then we have two files, customers1.csv and 2.csv, and these files have got two different set of job bookmark key. So we will use, so for instance, this one has got a customer ID from the customers1.csv has got a customer's ID from 1 to 50, and 2 has got from 51 to 100, and then we will use this customer ID as a job bookmark key to determine to see how job will avoid reprocessing of the data using customer ID as a job bookmark key. So the first step, what we do, that we go to the customer folders and upload the customer1.csv file, so that my first set of file is there. Then we do some things to catalog it. So we go to the Glue management console. We create first a database called Dojo database. Then we add a crawler, and this crawler is called Dojo crawler, where we're simply looking into this customers folder in the Dojo data lake and catalog any file under that, and we give this crawler a role, and the same role we are using for Glue job and crawler both. So in this case, this crawler is also assigned this Dojo Glue role. And then we simply select frequency as run and demand, and then an output as Dojo DB for this crawler, and finally we simply run the crawler. When we run the crawler, then it will simply crawl your customers folder and customers1.csv file over there, and it will generate a table schema, catalog schema, where you can see that it has customer ID, name, email, city, country, territory, and contact first and last name. Now in this case, we are going to use customer ID as a job bookmark key, which is an integer type, which is an incremental and has got value 1 to 100. Okay. So now next step is to create a a Glue job. So we simply go to the Glue management console. We say we want to create a new Glue job, and then we provide a Glue job name, the role for the Glue job. We are saying that we are going to use Spark, and we select Glue job version 2, and then say for the script we are going to write a script by ourselves. So a script something authored by you. And then it will ask for the location where the script can be stored, and in this case in this bucket we created a script folder, and we're simply providing that script folder over here. And most important, that we go to the job bookmark in advanced properties and we enable it, that we want to enable the job bookmark for this job. Then we save the job and edit the script, and in the script you can see here, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation as well, that you initiate the job so that you fetch the state information from the previous job run. In this case it will be blank because it's running for the first time, but we'll run this job 2 times, and when we run the job second time, it's going to fetch that information. Then when reading the data from the catalog, we are saying that this is my Dojo table, and then my Dojo database, customers table, and then most important is my customer ID is my job bookmark key, and it is in the ascending order. Then we provide some transformation, and in this case we are saying that I just want to fetch the customer ID, email, contact, first name and last name, those fields, and finally we are writing it back to the S3, and we are converting this into a JSON format from the CSV format. And finally we are calling job commit, which means that whatever job run state information we have collected, we are going to save it so that my next job run can make use of that information to ensure that reprocessing of the data does not happen. And in this case, since my job customer ID is the job bookmark key, so whatever customer ID it has already processed, it is not going to process those customer IDs again. So what we do is that we save it, save the job. And since we already have a customers.1 CSV file in the customer1.csv file in the S3 bucket, we simply run the job. And when you run the job, it will run, and you can see it has succeeded. If you go to the output folder, you can see the output. And if you open this output folder, you will find that actually it has created a JSON file, and only customer IDs it has got is from 1 to 50, because those were the only customer IDs which were modified. And then you can see here the timestamp of the file as well. Now what we do is that we upload customers2.csv file to the customer. So now customer1.csv is already processed. Now we are adding customers2.csv file, which has got customer ID from 51 to 100. So 1 had 1 to 50. Now 2 has 51 to 100. And after adding this customer2.csv file, we are simply going to run the Glue job again. And again, that job finished successfully. And if I go to my output folder, you can see here that it has created a new file altogether. So it has not modified the previous file or anything. It has just created a new file. And if you open this file, you will realize that it has data only from 51 to 100. So even if in the source file you had your customers1.csv and customers2.csv, both files present, it did not reprocess customer1.csv file, because in the customer1.csv file, the customer ID from 1 to 50 were already processed and they were job bookmarked. So when the job run again, it simply processed from 51 to 100. It simply avoided customer1.csv file because those records from 1 to 50 customer ID were already processed by the previous job runs. So this was a demonstration how you can use a job bookmark to ensure that your files are not, your data are not reprocessed across multiple job runs. Now, the next step is to go and clean up the resources so that you don't incur any cost post this exercise. So that was all for this exercise, guys, which was more to understand how you can use job bookmark feature in the Glue job to learn to avoid any kind of reprocessing of the data. Hope you like it, and if you like, please click on the like button. Please subscribe to my channel. There are many other similar workshops and exercises which you can use to learn about AWS services. So please do explore this website to run these hands-on labs and exercises and learn AWS services by using them. We always look forward to your feedback, whether it's about the new content or any mistakes we are making or any changes we have to do or any other feedback. Please feel free to provide your feedback either in the comment section in the YouTube channel, or you can also click on the Contacts app tab over here and can provide feedback from there as well. So we always look forward to your feedback to improve our content, to make new content, and to make sure that we are bringing the right kind of things to you. Okay, so I look forward to your comments and feedback. I promise to come back again in next couple of days time with another such tutorial and the video. In the meantime, stay safe and have a nice day. Bye bye.